is your task with, how to start the process and so forth, and then checking into the churches. So you can, that's what you can talk about. I could tell them that those are the three things that I need to check.
Okay.
That's all she has to report.
Yes.
Do they have their bags too?
Yes, it was on the table.
Okay.
Where's the folder?
Right here.
Well, I'm gonna be handing this out, so.
Just put it out front.
Doesn't matter, I guess.
That's fine.
We just sit. Just put it over here.
Yeah.
Okay, so, wanna go ahead and fill in the outer circle? Do we have more people coming in? Nancy, are you the inner circle or outer?
I'm right here, I'm up.
Alright, so why don't we move you into the, would you be okay?
Yeah.
To be in,
Let me just
inside?
put some cheese out, or just leave it in the container. In case anybody wants a snack. You ready? Here I am.
Okay, so this is what's called a fish bowl. And yes, the people in the middle are fish, and the rest are the bowl. And what we're going to do is have the people, the fish, go ahead and use the microphone and have a conversation about what's been done so far. The outer circle has the more important role of listening, and listening really, really hard to what they hear, what they're thinking about, and to have that process. Once they go around and kind of share a piece at a time, and ask each other questions, the fish, once the fish ask each other their questions and kind of finish their conversation in the next few minutes, and we're going to try to keep this whole thing to 10 minutes. If there's a question that wasn't answered, then we'll have a time for the outer circle to go ahead and ask that question. But the goal is to keep most of us listening, and listening for opportunities, listening for new ideas. So we think better when we're in a listening mode, and we're usually more productive than when we're talking. So we are very thankful for those courageous people that are being fished today, and we'll hand over the microphone and go from there.
Go ahead, Ann.
Okay, I was addressing the question of how to approach other churches. We're talking about merging now. I called several people in several churches that I know in the area, and I came up with several different ways they have used the process. Central Baptist Church and First Baptist Church had two pastors that knew each other and had discussed the merge with our groups. And they came back to their individual churches, and that's how we got into the discussion of merging with the First Baptist Church. We did not pan out in the long run, but we spent quite a bit of time going back and forth to each other's church, sharing choirs, sharing ministers, and so forth. That was one method. Clarks Falls Baptist Church minister was in they were in a very small building and had no restrooms, but they had a growing congregation. The minister went to the Third Baptist Church and approached that pastor there, and they got together and they actually merged very shortly thereafter because the needs of the Clarks Falls Church was great. They had been merged for 6 years. The first few years, both sides lost people. Clarks, Old Mystic Baptist Church in Quonic Bridge were another situation where they considered merge. And I don't know how it was initiated, I forgot to ask Julie that, but the councils got together. And the councils, they did the discussions. And evidently Old Mystic Baptist Church did not have the money that it was gonna take to get a lawyer and start the process. So they disbanded, and a lot of members went over to the Paquonic Bridge. Taftville Congregational Church and Newark Congregational Church years ago talked about merge. They're both congregational churches that are close to each other. And that collapsed because neither one wanted to leave their building. Now, I think a lot of underground work gets done with beginning to think about merge, because I myself have a friend at Park Congregational, and every once in a while I ask her, are you ever thinking about merging? And I asked her the other day, Nancy, have you ever talked about merge in your church? And she said, yes, the people among themselves have talked about merge at Park Congregational Church, but it never got past the people among themselves talking that way. But she said it became less of a thought because there were a block of people that seemed to be holding them back, and those people all left just recently, and they have a brand new minister that they love. So that has receded into the background, the talk of merge. Let's see, what else did I shook the bushes. I went and I know a lot of people in different churches because I've lived in North Stonington, and of course that's kind of far away from us. Okay, Newark Congregational Church has a council meeting on the second Wednesday in April, talking to a church in Canterbury. So they are up there in the forefront talking about merge. And 2 years ago, I think it must be now, their organist passed away very suddenly. They do not have an organist to this date. And they have a very active Sunday school of 16 to 20 children. But in the service itself, there are 10 to 12 sitting in the pews on Sunday morning. So their council is now talking to Canterbury Church, and that will be this month. So that I would put on the top as a church very interested in merging. Taftville Congregational Church itself now has probably 25 to 30, and they sounds very similar to us because they have about 9 to 10 people in the choir. So that's including the choir, and Ellie is the one that told me about the merge with Newark several years ago. She said they have no thoughts about merging at this point because they think they're doing fairly well. Let's see. Along with these talks, I got some other information as to if they're open and, open to all types of people. And so that comes under another category, but I have some information about that. The Third Baptist Church that Clocks Falls went to has very radical ideas. And when I mentioned something about the Congregational Baptist really would be okay merge with our thinking, my thinking, I was talking about myself. She was a dead silence on the phone, and then she said, well, we welcome people, gay people, but we don't baptize them. And then some other things came out, and I thought to myself, very, very radical ideas, so I sort of cut down the whole, because I know Loretta, and I thought to myself, my goodness, I can't talk anymore with Loretta. But they are having some younger, new people come, and they also started Christian school, kindergarten through 12th grade. And they have a youth minister. So that's
And which one was that?
about it.
Which church was that?
That's, well, they're calling themselves a Unity Baptist Church now. It's in the middle of North Stonington.
Kind of a misnomer there.
Yeah,
That's not the Pendleton, right? That's not,
no, Pendleton is open.
no.
No,
Pendleton is Castle.
No.
That's right.
No.
No.
That's Peniel.
Oh, that's Peniel, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, just, they're not open, just letting you know
on top of, the one on top of the hill?
that. That is why I'm
I
not.
mean, they're open for business, but their
They're open
theological
for business,
mindset is
but
not,
not
is not
theologically.
very open.
Yes, would not merge with our,
Oh,
We would clash.
well, you know something, somebody told me they're open. Somebody told me that.
they're
So,
open.
Yeah, they're open for business.
Okay.
Are we able to move on?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, that was great.
That was really a lot of work.
That was a lot of work.
Yeah, do we ask questions now, or?
The
do
inner
we hold?
circle, yes, yeah, ideally.
Microphone.
I guess my
No.
interest is that, yes, we did try to discuss a merge with First Baptist several years ago. But things have probably changed significantly between both churches. That's my personal opinion. We're in a situation now significantly different, I think, than we were before. All the way around, and I'm sure they are themselves too. Things change, it's been a number of years. I think the group probably should be open to maybe revisiting that again and seeing where that goes. I know that some of the theology differences that were back then don't exist any longer, or my understanding is they don't exist any
They
longer.
changed.
And that's where, Mark?
At
First Baptist across the river.
They
across
changed
the
their
river.
theory?
I believe they have changed it, yes, so they've had a change in the pastor,
So they-
several of the people who were not willing to be
We don't know
accepting,
totally.
Okay.
but I think it's
So
worth
they-
a revisit.
Okay, do a christening on a baby.
I want to address First Baptist and say that I personally called the pastor on my own, not mentioning that I was from Central. And I said, do you folks welcome gays and lesbians? And he said, yes. Do you baptize them? Yes. Do you marry them? No. That would upset the congregation. There was a great divide. There are some that are very welcoming, and there are some that are absolutely against it.
Okay.
So
Make our gains up a little bit.
that's current within the week information
okay.
on the congregation.
So they did have a longtime member she and her family had been there for a long time, raised their kids there, and she came out as gay and had a partner, and they were there for a while, sang in the choir. But there's they've had an experiment in that journey. So they're not where they were 10 years ago, let me put it that way. So that they are evolving because of someone that they know. So, did you want to say more? Can I share one thing that Harry shared with me last week? We were sitting back there, and I ran by him about merger, and I said, Cameron said this thing where, what's the success rate of mergers? And she said 92% of the time, the new church will shrink to the size of the larger of the two before the merger. And he said, I would agree, except I'd say 100%. And he said, what tends to work better, because basically Harry had the same job that Cameron had in the United Church of Christ at the national level. Harry did at the national level in the American Baptist churches. And both are free church traditions. We work very similarly. And he said what has worked well is that one church will go and join another, just go and join it. But what they do is they take their history with them, they take their finances, resources, capital with them, and they write out an agreement and put some stipulations on it. Like if we're gonna use this fund, then you need to come and talk to these people first before it gets used. That sort of thing. And that's what they did between Moodus and the Baptist Church in Danielson, which Pastor Nancy Cornerstone, which she pastored before here. And there were a couple bumps along the way. They're musicians. There was a little tension there. You know, who's going to do what, that sort of thing. But it worked it out.
About that church in North Stonington Center, they have no pledging, and everything comes through the plate on Sunday morning. They have no knowledge of how much money they're gonna have for the year. I thought that was really unusual. They just pledge once a month for missions, so they know what that income is gonna be for the year, but the rest of it, they fly by the seat of the pants.
There's something called a faith budget in some more conservative in more conservative traditions. There's something called a faith budget, and so they really emphasize like percentage. They emphasize tithing, and then they go on faith, so they don't pledge as much.
So we're gonna keep going around and get everybody's work out on the table?
My question that I was addressing was, what would we be looking for in a church we might want to merge with? And I interviewed the merge committee first, and then I interviewed by phone council members and members who come regularly to church. I did not go for people who don't show up. You know, I figured I'm not gonna, if they don't know about what's going on, I'm not gonna tell them. So, overall, there was an idea of compatibility, shares our beliefs, goals, interests, principles, ideas, and values. I'll give you this afterwards so you can catch up. 9 people had as a first priority similar theology, progressive, liberal was what some of the people said. 12 people said welcoming, including LGBTQ and race and ethnicity. 9 people said the music program and choir were important, and 1 specifically said they'd like an instrumental choir or band. 6 people wanted a friendly, amiable church. Wouldn't we all? 5 said preaching was important, to be loving and accepting, a good mannered message, and dynamic were some of the words people used. Several people wanted it near Norwich, geographic limit. 3 people said Baptist or congregational was okay. There were several people who said opportunities for youth or younger families with children would be welcome. Some people said involved in missions and in the community. 1 person wanted a financially stable church. A couple of people said they wanted one willing to merge. Some flexibility in worship services offered was mentioned. Not too rigid was mentioned. A country church was mentioned. So those were the. It's not a scientific poll, but it's
A poll.
a poll.
Thank you.
Good job, Rose.
Return to report. Okay.
I didn't know if there were any questions.
Did anybody have any questions?
Has anybody asked the Unitarian Church that rents here to join us? Just throwing that out there. They're not that much different. I've gone to the Unitarian Church. They're really not much different than we are. I used to go to Grace Episcopal in Yantic all the time. I lived right next door. I'm just throwing that out there, because if you're looking for a merger, they're renting from us. Invite us into the sanctuary, make us one. It's a merge that's right there. They're really not that much different. I went to Norwich.
Well,
Music. Paul had a question?
Yeah, his hand was up.
Yeah.
In a discussion of merge, would it be the will of the majority to have the merged church undergo a name change? Does that go without saying?
I didn't ask that.
It would be something that could be considered, I think, by both congregations.
Right, supposing we had a deal with a church and everything was fine, except they didn't wanna change their name, would that obviate a joining?
I think that's a great question for the merger group to kind of wrestle with. It's a good, really thoughtful.
You want us to wrestle now?
You already are, you just didn't know it.
First we gotta line up, now we gotta wrestle.
I wrote down several names of churches, but I don't know where they are.
I have a list.
Central Christian Church.
Oh.
And with that other church, you know, if the other church is willing to give up their name, we'll give up our name, we come up with a new name
Yeah.
and combine it. Make it a really truly merged
Right,
church.
we'll call it Central Park.
That
There
name
you
was-
go.
That's in New York
Okay.
City.
No, it's here in Norwich, right
Barbara,
in
save us,
downtown.
please.
It's gotta be
Okay.
5 years ago
If
that
we-
I mentioned Park Central.
If we wanna get out of here by 1 o'clock, we're not gonna make it. Sorry. Paul and I were tasked with finding a list of churches that we might possibly merge with. And I think Paul went right through the phone book, the yellow pages. No, but he came up with a list of over 20 churches, and then others on the team added to it. And you got that as a handout today. We created a poll that you also got, and we asked you not to fill it out now, but if you could take a few minutes at the end of the session today and give it back to me, that will give us some guidance, because I don't think we want to even contemplate contacting 20 churches, So if we find out what's important to you, as far as, I mean, if you don't wanna go more than 5 miles, then that cuts out a lot of the churches, for an example. So that's basically it. If you have other thoughts, other suggestions, please get them to someone on the merge team. And feel free to mark up anything that we gave you with the survey. If you wanna mark the list of churches, put something next to them, perfectly okay. Just so we can kind of tabulate it. So I think that's pretty much it for what we did. Any questions?
What was the name of that church you said is worshiping here?
Unitarian.
Unitarian, okay.
I have one question, that I don't know the answer to, is where do we all live?
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting to get a map and just everybody put a thumbtack in it or something. And to see where we live, and okay, so that direction might be helpful.
Like
Right.
Norwich is pretty much central for most everybody, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I walked here, I live right down the street, so.
That's really convenient.
Very
I
convenient for
have a
me.
question, but I think I already know the answer, but it's.
Can you do it nice and loud, Jennifer?
There's 2 different churches in, Basra. One is a, Baptist church and the other one's Congregational, but I don't know anything about either one of them, other than that they're there and
Well, I think
they
it's
seem to have a
Leffingwell.
lot of attendance.
Yeah.
I drove by them
Can
this
you
morning.
repeat what she just said?
I think one of them you're talking about is Leffingwell Baptist. It's out on Route 82. Out past Walmart.
No,
Okay.
no, it's,
It's on
down
Route
by a little
163 in Basra?
Catholic church called St. John's Mission. It's by a school. It's
I'm not
over
familiar.
by,
Can you just repeat what she's saying, Mark, so that
The
camera
Baptist
gets it?
church right by right by the school, I know where that is, yeah?
yes.
I don't
On
know.
one,
the name of it.
Route 163?
No, there's 2, there's one on Route 163 and there's one right by the school. right in the center of town. One is in the old Fitchville, one's in Basra.
Oh, okay.
So I think it sounds
But
like
it's
that
all
would be
Either
a-
two-way.
I think it's called Fitch, it used to be
couple of
called
names
It used to
that
be called
Baptist
Fitchville Baptist
Church.
Church. I went to,
We have,
Bible
excuse
school there as
me,
a kid
we
in
have
summer.
both Fitchville and Basra on the list of churches.
Okay.
And so,
Already included.
Right down the
you
street
know,
from my house.
we
Okay.
will look at all of those, and if you have any thoughts on them, please share.
Okay.
Well, the congregation.
You have that on here,
Are
so it's
all of
Fitchville
these
Baptist Church.
churches willing to do a merge?
We don't
We
know.
don't know
any- the purpose of this is to see if you know of any reason that they would not be a good fit, and you wouldn't want to merge with them. That's what we're looking for, so we have to weed the list down to a manageable number. And, we can't call every single church on here.
Sorry.
That's all.
Well, I have something to contribute quickly to eliminate them, if that's what you're saying.
Hmm.
The,
Could we pass the microphone back to
the
Jennifer?
Baptist church,
Jennifer, can you come up, can you just stand up and hold the mic,
The
please?
Baptist church doesn't have a lot of parking at all, or property, and it's not that big
Which one?
logistically.
The
The
Church?
Baptist church in Ditchville. The Congregational church has a lot of property and is a big church. So in terms of logistics and structure, and it has a lot of,
On the sheet.
that one has, more potential.
Is that the one on Route 163? By the gravel?
Where, yes, where the Edelman's gravel
Yes,
and where,
okay.
I think it's Six Packy Farm, it's
Yeah,
a lovely
yeah.
little farm store.
Yeah.
It's where the Basra, and this is just something to keep in mind in terms of generating more interest.
Right off the highway, it's easy to get
It
to.
is on the same road where the Basra Farmers Market is during 6 of the 12 months. And on a Friday night, I'm new to this area from a year ago, I used to live farther down the shoreline, but there are tons of people that go to the Basra Farmers Market. And so in terms of exposure, or doing events to coordinate with the farmers market or draw in new people, it has that as well.
Thank you.
And I would just add that we stuck with just Baptist and Congregational churches because we figured we were closest in philosophy. That's how the list was made.
Barbara and I had this discussion, but I believe Lee Edwards is still the pastor there.
Cousins up there.
I go by the church regularly, and his name is still on the sign. And for those of you who don't know, this is the church that Charlie and Marie Noyce attend.
The one in Basra.
Yeah.
Yeah, I ran into, the one in Basra.
We fixed it on one list and I
163.
copied
The one
the
on
wrong
Route
one.
163. Because I ran into them at the shack one day and I asked them and they said that's where they were going. Caddy Shack.
Anything else?
Are you on the selling group?
Yes.
All right, thanks.
I'm kind of reporting out for the selling group's actions. We had 3 tasks that we had signed up for last week. The first one was Emily Minor, our bookkeeper, was going to contact several of the clients that her business, that she's now employed by up in Providence, deal with, that are associated with commercial type real estate and that sort of business. She sent out an email to those folks, and she is currently scheduled to have a meeting with one of them this coming week. So we have nothing to feedback yet at this point, but she's following up on that.
It's tax season.
It is tax season. The second item on our task list was for communication with Andy, Sheckley, I believe his name was. Julie Martin had provided the name.
I think it's Shikey.
Shickley.
Shikey.
Julie Martin had provided the name. It was the realtor that was used by Old Baptist Church when they sold their property last year or so. Lee Selena has contacted the realtor Andy, and we have a tentative meeting scheduled with him on April 9th to sit down and discuss what it is. He has no idea what our building looks like, but if we're gonna have him potentially engaged in the selling process, He would be one to provide for an assessment of what we have and what the real estate market looks like and would bear for this complex that we live in. So there's a meeting set on that date, and at this point, she and I are scheduled to go to that. And I would say that any other member that is on the actual selling committee, there's 4 of us, Janet, Ray, Lee, and myself, I probably should limit it to that. I mean, bringing in this whole gaggle of folks into that meeting probably would not be productive. But we certainly will feed back information that we come back with from that meeting. The third item is also that I was gonna contact Bill Hadley. Some people might remember the name Bill Hadley, others won't have a clue. But Bill Hadley was a gentleman that we've been dealing with here at this church for a number of years, particularly back when Nancy was still here. And we were looking at it from the standpoint of more of renting space to people, like Spirit Road Church rentals, and not so much Unitarian, because that one happened on its own, but when Peniel, he actually was the one that got the Peniel Church to come and sit down and talk with us for almost a year before that discussion fell apart. But that's the kind of work he does. He works for Bill Hadley Realty. And one of the segments of his actual business is dealing with the sale and promoting and repurposing churches. So he's in the line of business, and I talked to him briefly about an assessment of what our property value is here. And of course, the city has an idea of what our property is worth, what it's evaluated at, and what it's assessed at. But for the purposes of putting a building like this up for sale, that assessment, and don't even think about using that as a baseline. The city obviously likes to make things look a lot better than they are, and certainly we're not paying taxes, but if we were, they would already have a figure on the books of, based on what the property assessment was, what the evaluation was.
What is the property evaluated at?
The city has this listed at 2.3 million as an evaluation. It's assessed at about the assessment's about 1.6.
Okay, so that's 70%.
Replacement value of this complex today stands at 4 million.
For the insurance company?
For the insurance, basically, yes. But Bill's saying you don't wanna go off and use those figures because they're not really realistic in today's environment. One of the things that we have that is significantly gonna be a deterrent for a sale of this building is that there's no parking. Now, he's been familiar with, because he's been here a lot, he's seen our building, he knows what it looks like, he thinks it's a beautiful facility. It's got a lot going for it, particularly now that we've had handicap accessibility and restrooms, and those sort of things, new heating complex and all that. But because there's no parking, and there's a new business right next door that is open 7 days a week, 7 o'clock in the morning until midnight, or something like that, there's a lot more attraction, and that place is very busy. Now, fortunately, it hasn't seemed to have much impact on us on a Sunday morning.
Like in a week.
That's true.
It's been open a week.
But every time you go into the place, it's a gaggle of people that are in there, so they're doing pretty well as far as the business, but that means those people have some place they gotta go park before they can go.
Do we know if the people who, the Old Norwich Savings Society property, the church that's in there is renting, they didn't buy it?
Correct.
So the people who own the property, will they let us use that parking lot if we all of a sudden get busier?
It's a good question to open up and ask again. One of the things that is happening
It's
up
new
there
owners,
is,
so it's an issue that maybe should be addressed?
well, the church that's up on the top of the hill now with Beulah Land, isn't it? If you park your car up there early on a Sunday morning, you might as well plan to spend till about 2 o'clock in the afternoon here, because you're not gonna get your car out. Because the parking lot is mobbed with parishioners for that church. I have not heard or seen any activity from Castle Church yet, and there's no indication in the lot that says that Castle is using that lot as a opportunity for them. The only thing, the signage that's up there at the moment, it talks about some kind of a Sempra Medical Care, which I don't even know what that is or where they're located. I assume they're in part of the Old Norwich Savings Society. They have not been an issue in the past, but I think that the more primary issue that you gotta deal with is Beulah Land Church, and they just flood the lot. And there's been several folks here that have gotten trapped, because they fill the lot and they double and triple park. So just so you know that, but But anyway, parking as far as selling this complex is gonna be one deterrent. And certainly, I'm sure Bill will find other things around here that
And do we
are
have
of
an agreement
concern.
with the city to use the parking lot that's over by the city town hall?
Yes, oh yes,
You do have an
yep.
agreement with that? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, I don't know
It's-
what the parking
We
situation
don't need an agreement with them, it's open to the public.
It's a
on the
public
weekends.
parking
is. On
area.
weekends, but not during the week, okay.
Yeah, during the week, it's pretty much all business related, so you're not gonna get in there. A lot of the spaces that are on the lower level are reserved for the church across the street.
Okay.
So if you don't have a parking pass during the week, you are subject to being ticketed or towed,
Okay.
just so you know.
But the top of it is always open and anybody can park there.
Well, that's why I was asking, because I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
You have a text? All right.
Yeah, I was tasked with getting the video conference between Mayor Nystrom and Cameron. That's happening tomorrow at 4 o'clock.
Yay.
And after that's done, she'll write a report for us.
So, excellent job, and can we give the people who took on being fish today an applause? I cannot believe how much you've done in 7 days. That's incredible. So obviously, you're very committed and very energetic around this. That's exciting. So we have we have a slightly different setup where we have a merging group of tables here and a selling group of tables here. We tried to give you a little space, so maybe the sound dynamics are a little better for you. And we don't have to move. I know we're 12:49 or so. We also have an opportunity for a few adventurous people that are interested in moving into or talking about as we change, what's really important to us. And the pastor is actually going to start that conversation. So we're looking for 3 or 4 volunteers to find their way as we split into groups over to the choir loft room thing over there. Thank you, Paul. And to have that group start. And we want, as we go through the next few weeks, people to kind of filter in there and have conversation around what's really important, because we don't want to lose. We want to make sure we hold on to the things that are really, really important to us, and that's very, very important. So if you were students, I'd say be really careful getting up, but I don't have to say that because you guys are all good with that. And I just want to, as we prepare for next week, I just want to point out that this is really our update session, so we're going to try to get you through it quicker next week. And it's not necessarily a place to get all your questions answered, because many questions are great questions, and it's great that you're thinking about them. And that's why we go back to our groups and say, okay, well, as a merging group, I need to think about this. So it's really, really important. You're doing exactly what we need you to do. At the same time, you don't feel this is the only time to have a conversation. We are going to have those conversations in the smaller mid groups.
We got one thing that I forgot to pass. I talked about Bill Hadley. I actually have a meeting with him scheduled for this Tuesday at 1 o'clock. So I know Ray's working, so he can't possibly be there. I know Janet, you're gonna be down here.
I'll be here anyway, so.
Okay, so at least Janet and I will meet with him and do some preliminary groundwork. That's not to say we're gonna select him or we're gonna select Andy, the other realtor that we're dealing with. We may come up with a completely independent person from them, but at least they'll be able to give us an assessment of what they think we need to go off and do and how to do it.
Jennifer, could you come forward again, please?
I actually don't have a question, it's just a little more information for both of your groups. One is, I'm aware that the person that owns Cafe Otis has purchased that parking lot.
Oh, they have.
Yes, they
Oh,
own
that
that
comes with the
parking
building.
lot.
The big parking?
The little one.
I'm not sure which one.
It's the
No,
little
it's
one
the
around the
little
corner.
Nope, the little one behind the building they own, but they own another one.
Did they purchase that from the Dime Bank? Because the bank used to own that.
I'm not sure
parking
who
lot.
they purchased it from, but I know because the owner of it told me.
All right.
And so that was something that I didn't hear that you knew, so I'm just saying it, I don't know what they own, but it's good to know
That's
what
an
they
item we
own.
need to talk about over there.
And then the only other thing was, well, actually a couple of things. One was, nobody's mentioned the Norwich Development Council, which is kind of a independent,
That's on my plate of things to do.
Bob Mills,
Yep,
who's,
yep, we got his
Okay.
number.
and, you know, they repurposed the Taffville factory up for condominiums, and they have a lot of commercial investors from other areas, so. And then the other thing, just in terms of the area, in terms of economic development, there's, I don't know if anybody knows this or has any bearing on any of this, but there's a building, I don't know if it was one of the churches in the little area of the Antic, where the fire department is, but there's a boutique hotel that purchased, that's opening up in a year. And so it's at crossroads of, obviously, somebody's done their research economically about traffic, and it's just a factor, I think.
That's been going on since 1998, because I lived right next to that. I lived between the factory and Grace Episcopal. There's a little road there called Chapel Hill Road, and the factory actually purchased my house when I lived there.
Well, that was the other thing I was gonna say.
That's great information to have. We're gonna move into those groups, and
Could I just say one
after
thing?
Ms. Ricketts.
I'm sorry, but I can only be in one place, so I will ask the two other groups that I'm not in if somebody will take notes and get them to me. Thank you, I would
Yes,
appreciate
we
it.
do need a note taker, that would be wonderful.
One comment that I wanted to make, Brian, that if you were in the merge group last week and you wanna go to the selling group or vice versa, there's no reason why you cannot do that. You know, feel free to mix it up.
And your task, which I didn't mention, your task is to filter everything down that you have in stickies to 10 things that we're gonna write in marker on one of your giant stickies. So I'll hand you the markers. 10. Try to filter it down to 10 in 4 minutes or so.
Good job, everybody.
So which group is which?
Okay, so this table is, again,
Merging.
this table is merge, that is cell.
That is so.
Important to store.
And in the choir room is what do we want to bring with us? What's important to us?
How about, did you run across Salem Congregational Church in your, you didn't, because somebody told me they were strict.
I think he kinda said.
But you did hear that about,
That's where I came from.
But I can't,
That's why I left.
right across the, right across the road.
Don't forget to turn in your surveys.
Hilton Hill Homestead, that big yellow house. And, she was a great friend of mine. She died when she was 106. Oh my gosh. Yeah, and she and I were great friends all these years, and, so, it's a wonderful place up there on Pendleton Hill.
It's just, it's been more open and they just, I think they felt like they weren't gonna ever find anybody full-time. So they hired someone who was Pentecostal from Florida, part-time, and like the whole, it's just like the whole church changed. And I was on the committees for selection. I said, I can't in good conscience give Cass my vote. I said, I've been married to Baptist my whole life. I said, I've never seen anything like this. I don't get it. But I think their fear was that they wouldn't find anybody. So like here was someone, and she wasn't ordained. She had been to school. She had taken the requisite classes to be a Baptist minister. No, I was like, I just said, I recuse myself from the vote. If that's what you want to do and you want to move forward with that, I can't do it.
Well, that's good to know.
No, but super strict. No, yeah, the whole thing, not really. I asked questions about LGBT and really, one of her son is gay, and now she feels like a person. She's not welcoming, yeah.
Okay.
I was like, that's not for me.
No,
What do we want to take with us? Let's go.
where's my merch?
I guess Paul and I are here.
I gotta go in and get my,
Some of these.
Merge, right here.
We're in, Barbara, we're in Merge.
No, she's selling. She wasn't in our group. No, she wasn't in our group last week.
Well, she was sitting next to me.
She,
this one
she
time.
started, but then when he said which one you want to go
Same
to.
thing. We won't get rid of any of them, any of the suggestions. You're always there for us.
Oh, here's my favorite one. How do we deal with resources, organ, funds, pastor, and music director?
How much are you worth?
I'm concerned about that.
The organ is, what did I say, Paul? I handed that to you today, 250,000, I think.
We got all of this?
245 or something.
Are they one and the same?
What, you paid for it?
Well, we bought it and then we completed it in two separate.
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, it's like one of those things we'll get that for, you're selling it,
In
but.
fact,
Better work out what the next step is.
I don't know if I had an extra one, but I can make it.
They're right on the,
Borrow from a number of places.
This has a
What
lot
do you
of,
mean, right on?
they're right on
No,
here.
no, no. New ones.
you mean the new, oh,
New ones. We gotta list 10 things. 10 actions.
Who's on first?
I have no idea what we're supposed to do with this.
We're supposed to take, I think, 10 out of here
Yes.
for, I mean, on all of these. Find 10 things.
So wasn't that interesting, Paul, that I found out that underneath it all has been talking about merge? You know, I think when you talk, if you know personal people in certain churches and you talk to them, you find out things, you know? It's not like they never wanted to or whatever.
We got,
All right, what are we
four
doing?
sheets here that we've got
Stuff.
to turn into 10.
well, some of them are superfluous, so that's good. Oh, there's one. Maybe we could, what would be the easiest thing, if we got rid of the redundancy first?
Combine them.
Share what we learned with our church members. We don't need that, do we?
Like the one about music and all that other stuff can go with the other music ones, like this is the same.
Talk with churches we might merge with. That comes down the line someplace.
Believe, here's believe.
And this is kind of pick
No, this
someone
one
to merge
doesn't.
with who balances our strengths and weaknesses.
No.
They all go together.
They do.
See what you think of that one. This is emerging, talk with churches. Okay.
Oh, we have to remember to
Identify churches. Discuss what
And then the other one is
past
assets.
with regards
We
to our
just
church
learned
merging
that
with another
assets.
church.
I can't.
You know what I was gonna write on one of these sticky notes?
What?
If all else fails, join the Catholics.
Well, half my family goes there.
you know
That'll be an
what?
easy move for me.
I won't tell you who suggested that years ago, because of this person's feeling that many people weren't religious in this church.
Can we take your package?
She suggested the Roman Catholic Church up the road, and her name was Betty Hyde.
Oh, really? Why don't we put these closer together, because we're not getting a rhyme or reason here. I know, I'm confused. I can't write anything down because I don't know.
what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I think we need to have all,
Let's just take these off here.
those are the ones.
Here's one that belongs over here. How did you get it?
Find a
was on our
church with
sheet.
our
Similar-
same beliefs.
Similar, and that goes with this right here.
They're all mostly together.
What? That goes with that. Same beliefs. Find your church with same beliefs.
Beliefs, that, those both are beliefs.
Where's that?
All together, those are both beliefs.
That goes together.
This is beliefs.
Well,
Worship.
are you volunteering?
Yeah, what we learned with our church members.
I would volunteer for both.
Right. So we're trying to
that's
put our
another
10,
I'm good at writing.
we're trying to get our 10 actions down onto
Oh,
one
I
sheet.
understand.
Yeah,
Once
so we're
we
doing,
kinda
first we're
consolidate.
consolidating
Yeah.
all the same things,
Right.
and then
And,
we'll.
and Barbara, would that serve as your kind of action,
I hope so.
like that minutes, so to speak?
Yeah.
I know they're
This
on
one is
minutes,
all
but-
crossed off, so let's get rid of that one. Everything is crossed off it.
All right, we need to set a worship time.
I think you can be where
you know, that's a long way off.
Be kind to one another.
There's something about
I'll be kind
resources
to
and
you.
finances.
Gee,
Do we have
thanks,
a-
Sam.
Financial.
Where's your husband? Putting up a wall so that we don't lose our front yard.
Financial, and just saw another one,
Part
budget
of our
and
wall
finance.
fell down.
Do you have anything there for
And it's gonna-
money?
Just put a
About money?
fiscal issues or assets,
Money?
all of those things.
Finance, resources, that kind of thing?
No, let's be kind to one another.
Okay. Oh, what is there?
Talking with churches, my birds with.
Discuss what happened in the past in regards to our church merging with
This is
another church.
finance.
I don't, do we
Some
need that?
some of these just have like so
Do
many.
we need that?
Yeah,
I
I
don't
know.
think we need that.
We discussed it already
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
To a limited
I
extent.
brought it up and we discussed it, right?
Talk with churches.
They might merge with.
This says sexual preferences, and this is choir
Some
size,
church
church
building.
building. This has a lot of
That's
different
everything.
things on it.
Got it all on there.
Yeah, this is.
It's hard when they're all in one.
And this is
They
non-negotiable,
weren't supposed to be this way,
Yeah.
there's supposed to be one thought on it.
Yeah.
non-negotiables. So,
What?
non-negotiables,
Okay, may I volunteer the music program as a non-negotiable?
right. That, Barbara's got,
That's
that's
gonna
gonna
be
be
a huge
non-negotiable.
What I was saying, we can donate our organ to Slater. NFA. Slater.
We also have.
Did we,
Yeah, right?
did we decide today on the, you know, if we have directions on how this goes? Who talks to who first? Do the two pastors? And when we cull the list down to the manageable number, then what happens next? Do the two pastors talk to one another?
Pastors are usually on the council, aren't they?
That's
Pastors are
priority.
on the council.
That's in the
Yeah.
column.
Well, it was council to council, and it was pastor to pastor in several cases that I called up.
Okay.
That's how they approached it. It wasn't,
Yeah, but is that what we're gonna do? I mean, that's what other churches did, so this one says directions or a script or something along that, the next step, I guess.
well, there's a thought that I was having that we could write a letter.
But, yeah, but is it coming from the pastor to the other pastor?
I think some of this comes from the people in the church approaching the pastor. In the form of, like, say that we didn't have any of this conversation, and that we were just, thinking, what are we gonna do? So we talked to the pastor, and maybe.
Our own pastor,
Our own pastor.
right, but who ultimately comes together?
Yeah,
The two
it should be
pastors.
just two
The two
people, I think you can't
I
have
think
two
the two
councils
the
going
two
together.
pastors have to
Yeah.
come together and
Right.
pass it on to the council
That's
as
what
to.
happened in Clark's Falls. The
Yeah.
pastor got together with the pastor.
Yeah, okay, so
two
that's
pastors.
a direction.
Right.
Okay.
And then they involved their councils, but in their case, they had very small councils.
Oh, I'm sorry, she's standing there in the corner.
Here you go.
That's yours.
Oh.
There was another thought about the ecumenical clergy in the city of Norwich. Whether they should be
With whom do we
informed in
merge?
some way that this is happening to Central Baptist Church.
That kind of goes together.
Well, here's an opportunity to tell them.
I think this Vicky goes with the merging.
I don't think,
you're
and that has to be an
really
action
for
item, that
mergers.
has to be decided as an action.
Just one.
No, it's been.
That's the thing, is we're trying to figure out the actions, and we're just trying to get through these.
Yeah, we've got a whole sheet here we haven't even talked about yet.
Well, I thought he wanted you to do
I hope when the
4
pastor-
categories.
What about?
Four first
talks
things for,
with
that's
the,
what I
is it city manager? They're having.
He's gonna talk to Peter Nystrom, yeah.
Peter Nystrom, and who
This
else
is
is
all
involved
still
in that?
Cameron. Merging.
Cameron.
Right.
Oh,
Two of them
yes,
will have a
that-
video
all of this,
conference.
okay.
Yeah.
But this
Because
is all.
They need to
Joanne,
be
right.
sure
All of these
that they
are on
remind the
Wednesday.
Some of
city
these
that
kinda
they're the
repeat.
ones who took away
Yeah.
our parking.
So,
They did.
because they
Yeah.
came.
They had
That's what
every
I
right to
understood.
From
what they did,
Yeah, yeah,
without consideration.
yeah.
All right, we need to find what fits us and right partners, they go together.
Yeah, but we need 10 to put on that list.
Oh, okay. What things do we have in common? All right. With whom do we merge?
Now, this one says, what about others using our facility rentals? Will that put that under the finance part of it, or, I don't know where that. What about others using our facilities and rentals?
We
Do
did
continue-
not.
Do we continue to rent to new people in the interim?
That doesn't belong to us.
That was on the third thing that we chose not to follow.
So
We're
remember,
doing
if they
merge
start to
itself.
fall into other categories, that's the parking lot. So
Okay.
that sounds to me like a parking lot
Parking lot.
item. It's not that it's not important, it's just it's
Right.
kind of outside your scope, right?
Yes.
A lot of
Put this in the parking lot.
Oh, this is the virtual parking lot.
Yes, it's right
Yes.
over there, the virtual parking lot, yes, yes,
Okay.
thank you for clarifying for me.
Wasn't sure.
And then
pointed
some
in
of
the
us,
direction of
the other
other-
group, we started just clearing off the ones we've already started, the top three. Because obviously you already have that, and we can just put that as your first three.
What do you think they are?
They had 3 actions coming out of last week's.
Right.
So.
If merged, both sell, set up a new place, therefore a new beginning for both.
That looks like my writing.
Yeah, what did you mean?
I mean that if both parties leave their buildings, they start fresh in a new spot together.
Yeah, and
And so they, I feel more on an equal
And-
terms, you
and
know?
Don't you
this
have
one
to find
says,
one that you wanna merge with first, though?
Yeah.
So it sounds like some of those are falling into building relationships
yeah.
with other churches.
And this is, CBC, a community church, so that kind of is the same kind of a category, right? Building a community church.
Right, right, so that kind of, right, that kind of goes together as building what's next. What does that look
I
like?
said
gonna
next
have-
steps, right.
Oh, we need to think about if we merge, are we going to remain here or move to the church? So that's a building thing, right?
It sounds like it, yep.
Welcome emerging church, second option, rent to buy, this is all about the building.
You wanna know the name of the church?
What church?
Can I ask you something
Priorities
over
or
here?
options?
Christian Central. Christian Unity Church. Christians United. Way ahead.
Pastor and
Go.
councils, we've already discussed this.
Give me
Yeah, but
that.
we have to put it, we have to come up with 10 things, and that's one of them, is how the process starts.
Right.
The 10 things aren't like, it's almost like the 10 things should come more organically, and they have, that maybe you just don't see that as, that you've already said, like options, next steps, fiscal, compatibility.
This says, I go along with whatever you decide. So that I put in the parking lot.
That's a,
What would we do with our stuff?
Where are the ones that you took and did your first 3 from? Where are those? Are those kind of embedded in here, or did you already
Yeah,
pull them off?
as we were
No,
taking them
I
off
think-
and trying to put them into categories.
the
we
first
took them
3,
off.
one of them is right here. I think
How
you passed them out.
for
the churches. You passed them out
And
last week.
this one was,
Rosemary. Rosemary has one, and you have
Rosemary
one.
has one.
So we're gonna
Yeah.
start that was one of your ones, so that was 1, right? This
That was
goes to
number
1.
one.
Any others go to 1?
Barbara had one
This,
and
this
Rosemary
was
has
the,
one.
how does the process start? And so that was, going
Oh,
with
it's
it.
just the one you had to do.
We had to make the list of churches, possible mergers.
Right.
And
Okay.
then
And so was that-
And then Rosemary had one.
Rosemary has
she
one.
had the polling the
She
congregation.
has the third
So
one.
2 was list of churches.
And Paul,
Feedback,
the other one was Paul the
preliminary
congregation.
feedback.
Okay. 3 was polling and gathering info.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got, so if any of them fall into those categories, we'll just put them under here. Right? Is there another
come up with
category
10?
kind of forming?
I don't know. Be sure all are on board for merging. I don't know what that means. You know, because it's either merge or sell.
Well, so that might be if it's a consensus
Here's
building.
one that goes over there, talk with churches.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, so,
Contact all local churches of interest.
so maybe that's 4 though, because really you started the process by getting a list. And that's a huge one, right? So maybe that deserves its own. And I'm gonna say contact, communicate.
We did this, so I'm gonna just throw this
Identify
away.
churches we can merge with.
We
Yeah,
did
yeah,
this.
yeah.
Well, would that go?
No, we
We
already
did
did it.
identify,
We already
we
did
did
it.
it, okay.
Okay,
Contact churches.
okay, good, excellent, excellent. No, that's good, it's good, we're
What about staff?
urging. So, how do you read that as a statement? What do you,
What
Well,
does it say? What does it say?
Will we need the same amount of people?
Support people, staff. Yeah.
Staff.
yeah, so I think, so to set up, staffing, arrangements. Let's see if I can tell what that says later. So this is pastor to pastor council.
What kind of church? Beliefs?
Well, that's what the survey is for. To see if,
So let's put that right under polling, because that's why we're,
Okay.
and that's really important, because
There's
when you
another
said
polling.
polling, I didn't catch that, or I knew it
Here's
from this.
another polling.
That's excellent.
Who do we merge with? That would be list of churches, or is that polling still? What do we have in common? Polling.
I think this is contacting, right?
Yeah.
Contacting other churches is.
Yeah.
The
who?
right partners.
and what do we have to offer
Well,
another
this is pretty
church?
much the same thing that we're,
We need to
So-
find what fits
so-
our studies rule.
So what I'm hearing is that this right partner piece is becoming kind of a, we're almost trying to create a portrait of what that would look like. So maybe that is an internal conversation that's really, really a big piece. Because it's probably what makes or breaks us, right? You know, to really know, so maybe that gets its own. And I can be wrong, I'm just trying to facilitate,
Oh, no.
help you. Oh, okay.
That
I'm
can't
wrong.
happen, Brian.
It's wrong. So what did I just say? Something.
You just said like the priority of.
I don't know, I
wasn't
Priority of
So-
potential options.
So I'm thinking
Profile.
something to the effect of a vision.
Ideal scenario.
For merge. So like a vision or what's the, because that's something we really do need to develop. And I think those stats, I wonder how many people have, you know, how much of a process they've done on, and, because a part of this is looking inside us, which is part of what this group is.
Yeah, well, we're gonna
This
overlap.
is looking in the
I
mirror,
think.
yeah.
Yeah, we
yeah,
are.
And that's good.
And this, what do we have to offer another church?
That's really,
And this isn't, what do we offer to bring to another church?
So those go together.
Consider us?
A lot of these go
Right.
together too.
Finding a church with our same beliefs?
This is separate, talk with city officials.
And we are,
That's happening.
they are doing that.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
is
that
it,
goes-
is it a priority?
That goes
Yes,
on the
Oh,
other,
yeah.
that goes on the other.
And it's, I believe it's in their top 10.
it's here, no?
You know what? Let's put it in. So this sounds like an assets inventory, and not in a chairs and desks, but in a, you know, the pieces we bring to anything. Who are we? So maybe that does become something.
I don't think this is applicable. What do we do about a pastor? I don't,
Well, that goes into staffing, right? You
Oh,
said
okay.
staffing arrangement. I think
Yeah,
that's a
all
great, well, I think we do need to care about the people that are here, right? There's nothing wrong with caring. We're pretty good at that.
What about this, where do we land? CBC complex, other church, third independent location.
I think that person was trying to solve all the world's problems one day. So I think that's why we're contacting other churches.
That's another
Does
staff.
that work?
staff.
Yeah,
Staff.
excellent. Staffing's
This
right
is
here.
another, do we stay here or go someplace else? Right here.
And I did not write this, but
I
this
think
is,
that's why we're
this is a
contacting.
big question I have. What do we do with our stuff? I've got 179 years of memorabilia on the 4th floor that has to go somewhere.
And I've heard you read 3 of them that said that, so why don't we go ahead and make it one?
I'm gonna call Charlie, Charlie Y and see if they have room at Abcon's Historical Society for all our things.
Oh,
I'll have to put a new wing on.
I will listen for the laughter from on my desk when you do that.
This is
sure?
compatibility, you know, what are our beliefs, what are
Well,
their beliefs?
And that's extremely important, right? So I think that's under why we're developing a list of churches, right?
Be sure all are on board for merging.
Well, and
Well, that's not gonna happen.
People are gonna
Let's
make
be
it.
honest.
we have to have,
That's how we lose this many and this many.
did you,
and this
would you
many.
have guessed 2 weeks ago we'd have all these conversations in a week?
No.
No.
How about timeline and benchmarks?
How about an entirely different
So
conversation?
we have one, Brian, that talks about resources of our church.
We have, here we have 2 on finances and
Okay.
resources. So
That would go with this
these
then.
can go, those can go together.
Yeah, these are together. Resources, finances.
Yeah, why don't you join us? Be good. So I'm gonna put consensus, building consensus, and I think that's a huge part of what we're trying to do. So, and I think, I'll be honest, I've been really impressed how much you guys have tried to be inclusive of people that aren't even here.
Would you write
Which is wonderful.
building under consensus there so I can?
She's not giving it to you yet.
We need to think about if we merge, are we going to remain here or move to the church we're merging with? Okay,
So that's under, we're contacting churches.
We're just gonna move to a vacant lot.
Non-negotiables.
Non-negotiable.
We're having too much fun.
Consider that for each action that there is opposite reactions, we anticipate and understand each choice and what the result may be.
So I think this is under vision for merge. Is that okay with you?
And this is under, you know, a new worship time, that would be under,
Let's put that under staffing.
all right,
Under what?
staff.
Staffing,
That.
because we have to tell the minister when to be there.
Don't kill me telling how long to preach. Oh, did I say that?
I think that would be under the vision.
I think,
That's the wish list.
yeah, what we learned. Somebody from that church said that, somebody from over there.
So I think this goes under consensus. That share what we learned with other churches, members. I think that's why we're collecting our vision, our assets, right? Our understanding of who we are and what we bring. Our brochure. someone to merge with who balances strengths and weaknesses. So we have a number of those under contacting churches, so is it okay if I put that under assets? Well, consensus is working together, so I don't want to take too much.
Welcoming emerging church, rent a half option to buy.
This is why we try to keep one idea per thing.
And it, you know what happens to us when that happens? Oh, those go over
Does
to,
it,
Oh, they go over there?
that goes in the parking lot, it'll stay there.
Oh, parking lot, sorry.
They're not coming in around
Okay.
10, I know. And
Remember
this-
to be kind to each other.
Aww, that's nice.
Nice
Just
one.
kidding.
All right.
Just kidding.
Okay, this was about the building, and then this is the parking lot over here.
Is that something? They should do something.
No, this isn't physical parking, this is just something we're not gonna talk about today. It's almost a little misnomer, if I dare say that, because when I was taking the minutes, I thought you were talking about parking, not putting things on a parking lot.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did. Well,
Sorry.
because no, that's.
Okay.
Right.
There's been so much
Now.
talk about parking, yeah.
You've done the hard part.
Open your mouth.
Now you have to do the easy part. Turn these into sentences.
what?
All right, what's number one?
We didn't say that
Paul's
before.
the writer.
So number one is a list of churches.
Can you wanna, how do you wanna,
You do the right, Joanne, you write this down right.
no, I write in cursive, nobody can
All right, you do
understand
it,
it, so.
Barbara.
Well, Barbara can do it.
Terry,
Yeah, because I have nothing to do.
this says, how to approach churches and congregations.
Is that, are these supposed to be in a sequence, Brian, or just 10?
I think you should just do 10.
Okay,
Alright,
thank you.
And he's got them
I
numbered
love
for
you.
us.
I've got them numbered, although I don't see 7 anymore. Oh, it got stuck under 8. I thought 987, not 887.
All right,
All right, so number one,
Is
the
how to-
first one is,
how to
What's your
approach,
potentials?
Oh, this is 4.
this is well, it says how to approach other churches and congregations. Are our beliefs the same as other Baptists? Are we compatible? If we go in a new place, is it a new beginning? You know, so it's like, do we
Oh,
need to
there's one
find
and
what
two.
fits us?
you need to condense that into one sentence.
How to approach other churches.
Well, he put a 1 there, but that was a question on a sticky, so what do
Yeah,
we
well,
have in
this
common?
This was gonna be the first one.
Right.
This is number 2.
Right, well, not necessarily, he was just doing them as a sticky
Well,
statement.
yeah,
So
but I mean,
number-
we're not putting them in priority, we're just
Right.
doing, yeah.
So we already have a list of churches.
Yeah, but
And that's
who do we
number one.
approach? We need to narrow.
Who?
Well, that's what these surveys are gonna tell us.
We're not
If
gonna go
everybody turns
today.
in the surveys today, then I can try to tabulate them as to what people have said. So that we can't really, I mean, we've got the list of churches.
Who we approach, okay. We wanna make a list of who we approach?
No,
No.
A question.
No.
how do we approach other churches, congregations that are compatible to our needs?
We have these pastor to pastor.
Well, you have to come up with a
We
question.
need one sentence out of all
One
these
sentence.
4 pieces of paper. We need one sentence that's concise.
Right,
Initial approach.
it's gotta be a
Well,
sentence.
see, 1 and 2, this is 1 and 2.
Right, but that's, 1 is a list of churches. Number 1 was how to approach other churches and congregations, and he's got other things, you know, compatibility, what do we have in common, these are all. So he says, come up with a question.
I'm not leaving.
Okay, how do we approach other churches? Is it pastor to pastor, is it committee to committee, is it word of mouth, or?
Is it overall letter written by our pastor to pastors of other churches that we have figured out we would like to contact?
Right, but you need a question here.
Shall we write a letter to churches that we wish to contact?
So an action's great. I mean, it doesn't need to be in the form of a question. An action's
Okay.
fine,
All right.
from my perspective. So I'm starting to wonder if, and I know this is, I'm starting to wonder if the question, the piece to do here is that making a list of churches is one step in terms of developing a plan for approaching churches.
Okay, because you'd have to have a list before you could approach.
Right.
Okay.
And we have the
Okay.
list.
So I want, right, and we've
No,
already
but
done it. So what if, and how much of this would fall under that? That's why we kept them to that. Develop a plan for approaching churches. So we'd set up knowing what our beliefs are. Although that's actually, I think, could also be put under, what was our assets inventory, understanding who we are.
That's still beliefs and values.
Yeah, so that can go under here, because we're gonna really get a hold of those.
All right, what things do we have in common?
And the best things about that's what that group's working on.
Okay.
So,
We need to find what fits us, compatibility.
yep, so that's what that group is working on.
Okay, so this is, I guess these are two kind of,
So does
Together.
developing a
A plan for approaching church.
plan for approaching churches, does that consolidate all of those things number one was trying to get at? Does that work for you, Julie?
Were we going to whittle down the
Yeah,
amount
but
of
that's,
churches?
yeah, but
That's part of
not-
that.
That's,
part of
yeah,
it.
that's,
Yep.
that's not part of this.
plan for approaching churches.
So that's gonna be number one, develop
Right.
a plan for approaching churches, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
You all here? Yep.
And I don't mean to make this sound like it's simple in any way. It's
Okay.
not. And that's why we didn't say, let's try to meet one afternoon and figure everything out. So this is nothing
And then-
about this is simple.
Number 2 was the list of churches that you've come up with.
Okay,
Okay.
so it's a list of churches and the survey,
Determine the list by survey.
okay?
All right.
How does that sound, everybody?
Yeah, determine
a
list-
by survey. Determine. Develop a list, via survey. Okay, the third one,
Was polling in beliefs.
okay.
Poll the
Does that
members.
go into compatibility, is that what?
That
we
was
had?
all of it, beliefs, compatibility, polling members on their,
Well, that's,
beliefs.
that's,
See, I wonder if that's really developing our assets. I wonder if that falls under here once we created this one,
maybe.
right?
All right,
Because this is really like taking an internal, looking at developing a,
But that's,
what's that?
that's number 8. Well, that's,
number.
that's all
Let's
right.
make it
The
number 3.
numbers don't mean
Okay.
anything.
Okay.
And they only got to 6, so,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
you're kind of in some,
developing assets inventory.
Yeah, I had a word and
What-
now it's gone.
What are we putting on the table?
What are we on?
What are we, what can we offer in a merger? I don't know.
Why merge with us?
Was it something like self-evaluation or something like along that line?
you could do it in terms of a step, say, develop a brochure for the church, to just get that idea that this is who we are, who we come from, and whether or not it actually becomes a brochure, but just if you
Yeah.
go a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah,
Does that help?
What do you think?
All right. Developing a brochure, showing our assets or, you know, who we are, what we can offer for a merger, and not saying who's gonna merge with who and where we're gonna end up, but
Okay, so a brochure, what was that, what we were,
A brochure of what we bring? A melding of the 3 or 4? There's no wrong answers.
right,
Best test to take, right?
good. When did you take your training?
Still in training.
it's a lifelong process, isn't it? Yeah.
Read that to me.
Brochure of what we bring, and it doesn't necessarily mean a physical brochure, but just
A list.
what we would bring,
Yeah,
whether
sure.
it's, you know, our, I don't know if it's values as well as our real estate, or does that all come under that same
I
thing?
think it does. I think it does. I think mostly we should work on us. And the best part about that is that they're doing a lot of that over here. So that's a 3, but you've got help. You've got backup for that one. Because it's so important.
Staffing arrangement. You know, will we lose people?
So when you ask that question, I think of 2 things. I think of the practical person who says, well, we still need a music person, we still need this and this and this. And then I think about the people that are looking at current people and feeling like, you know, we need to care for them as we go through the process. So my question is where is that coming from? Is it and both are valid places to be. Which one are you falling on? Or both?
Both, probably.
I mean, this is an ideal time for us in terms of staff.
In many ways.
Caring for staff and congregation, feelings, something like that, is that what we're?
I think caring for the staff is, I mean, because you're really focused on them. I mean, right? I mean,
Okay.
if that's kind of where that was coming from, yeah, I mean, I think. What are your thoughts? Is that?
Needs. I don't know. Proposed staff.
Now, are
Caring
we talking
is-
about staffing for here or merging? Because,
Both, yeah.
all right, then you want to be able to find people that are compatible with whoever we merge with in their staff. So you want to sort of merge them in
Yeah,
so that,
we don't have any requirements. We don't have a clerk, not a clerk. No.
Can I leave with you?
No. Who was in the?
Secretary.
Secretary, we don't have.
Yes, we do. We have a new one.
We do?
It
As of
wasn't
when?
announced today, I thought he was gonna announce it.
When? Today?
Well, they've hired,
As of Friday,
yeah.
Thursday, I'm sorry.
But I think, I
but we
assume the
don't have a
person knows what they're
treasurer,
walking into.
so-called.
The person probably knows what they're walking into, right? I mean, they
Oh, I
know.
thought Emily did that.
So it's still.
She's a bookkeeper.
Treasurer.
So what about just supporting our staff?
Supporting staff, and did we want to include congregation in that too, or is that separate?
I think
I
you have to,
think it's separate because I think it means different things. is
Okay.
my
I would
thinking.
say supporting our staff, because if you say supporting staff, you don't know.
I think
whose
that's a
staff
great
you're
addition, yeah. I think
supporting.
that's great, awesome.
Now, as
Are we
far
getting
as
rid of some of these?
director of music, that's part of the staff, but as far as choirs go, they meld together no matter what, so that's not a concern, really. Park Congregational, hires a lot of their choirs members.
So does
Did you know
building
that?
consensus need more? And I understand we might not get 100, but we're trying for 100%. Is that reasonable?
What's that?
Building consensus, yeah. Yeah.
Building consensus of the church?
Right.
Is that, it's a goal. I get that it's almost impossible.
I'm sorry.
Or for whatever the decision is.
Consensus of all that will participate in a merge, is that what you're
Right.
saying?
Okay, so a sentence would be,
Percentage, merge percentage.
No, not percentage.
Participants.
No. Consensus.
Well, if you only have, no, I don't know. I think it
Can I
needs,
ask a question? How can you put down the percentage of people who are gonna merge when you don't know who you're merging with?
well, we're gonna,
Right.
Because
that's,
some people may say, oh yeah, I'm willing to merge, thinking it's gonna be close by in the city of Norwich. We decide to merge with Danielson, they're not
Well,
gonna drive to
I
Danielson.
think that's what
well,
that.
that's on the survey.
That's
That's
on
on
the
the survey though, so, and we have to wait until we get the results of that before we can,
Go to the
you know,
next step.
go to the next step, right?
So
Building consensus was what we were talking about, right? Building consensus,
but consensus is that we all kind of come out
Agreed.
making a decision. And that may be that, hey, you know what? Susie thinks that's the right decision for the church, but Susie says, you know, I'm probably gonna not go with the church. I
Yeah,
mean,
well,
that's
that's-
the reality, and I think that's what Paul's speaking to.
and that's
I think.
gonna, that's what
You
it's
know,
gonna be no
that's
matter what.
reality, but
Yeah.
we still had a consensus, it was the right decision for the group.
Yeah,
I think that's the consensus piece.
people are gonna go where they wanna go if they don't agree, you know, even if the majority wants to do this.
But they may totally agree with the, you know,
Yeah,
the concept and
Yeah.
support it.
yeah,
But we worked with everybody, that's really,
okay, so.
does that work?
So we're using building as a verb here.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you. Because of building consensus, what are we
Sorry, I
doing?
didn't think about that, that's good. I
Oh,
did
it's a
not-
good thing, because that's where I was off in left field somewhere.
Oh, sorry, sorry.
Building
Building,
consensus.
Not the
not
physical
the
building.
physical building, the verb,
oh, I see what you're saying.
verb.
Finally, I'm a little bit behind.
This is a
Sorry.
verb.
I'm sorry, sorry, that's my fault, it's on me.
Yeah. I'll just put that there. I can't write that in a big magic marker here. Oh, we're halfway there, folks.
We combine these, right? Contacting churches.
I've gotta
We
go
did this.
home. I got people coming.
Hey,
My
Developing-
hey, the
children.
Yukon women are playing now.
Well, you'll
Game's
get there for
almost
the
up.
score.
No, that's about it.
Because develop a plan for
started at
approaching
noon time.
churches, and does that go with list of churches or not?
Yes, yeah, we decided those went together and this went together, because you have to contact them, right? So that goes, these go
So
together.
determine a list and,
Yeah,
and.
we said these all went together.
Contacting.
All right.
We're not throwing these away, don't, we can come back to them if we need. So I wonder if this would be, develop like the attributes of a perfect merger.
Is anything perfect?
Nothing's perfect, but if it were,
Okay.
what are the attributes that would mean? Like, it would be a kind of a manifesto of merger.
Is
so.
that the sentence?
No.
Okay.
You gotta come up with a sentence.
Objectives?
Objectives?
The qualities, develop the qualities of a perfect merger? Or-
Develop a
Well,
quality merger?
I think the more you know about the church you want to merge with is important, because you don't want to
Develop
approach a
merging
church that
qualities.
is not open and
But-
welcoming, because
Or do
then
you
you
wanna-
have a block
Or
right
do you want a
there.
quality merger?
Yeah.
The qualities are there, but when you merge them, you want to have a quality merger, so everybody is satisfied, so to speak. the best of both.
Yeah, but again, quality, you know, can use it a couple
I
of
know.
different ways, that's what I was trying to get it to, you know.
Develop a fulfilling merger, ideal merger.
That
Come on,
sounds
now,
good.
who does crossword puzzles?
Develop a, what did you say, develop a.
An ideal,
Merger, I like it better than quality, because
Right.
quality can be
he had
misinterpreted.
fulfilling merger.
So, and really, whether you put a label on merger, in terms of thinking about the task at hand, the task is just gonna say, well, if we had a merger that does these 5 things, these 10 things, we would love that. So when I was saying quality, I was saying the qualities of
Yeah,
that merger that
not
works
the
for
quality,
us.
how good they are.
Right, or the attributes of
Yeah.
a
Or-
merger we can live with.
The other side of it is stumbling blocks to merger.
Those are gonna hit us no matter what. So we don't
Watch out
have
for
to
the
go
falling
searching.
stumbles.
That meets our needs and wants. A merger that meets our needs and wants.
Yeah.
Because there's a difference between needs
Right.
and a difference between wants.
Right, oh, definitely.
You wanna say ideal, you wanna use that, ideal merger would meet our needs and wants?
Yes.
Hey, we'll get with the program.
Just saying hi.
Ideal merger would
Meet
meet.
our needs and wants.
Underline one of them is more important than the other.
Needs.
Needs, underline.
Underline needs.
Okay.
Wants are like, you know, not necessarily.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
What have we got? This one.
So would all the stuff come down to consolidation of physical
Stuff.
Historical matter. Ephemera.
That's
Well,
really
I think we did staff
a
already.
plan for,
Oh, stuff,
Oh,
the stuff.
yeah,
Stuff, oh.
Like clean out Barbara's basement.
Not my basement.
so a plan for all of our,
Stuff.
Historical artifacts.
Yeah, because artifacts are different than chairs and furniture.
yeah.
How about,
Historical.
historical artifacts?
Artifacts.
So what do we say?
A plan for artifacts and stuff?
Yeah.
Church, historical artifacts,
Historical artifacts and
But
records.
what? It should be a word before.
Plan for historical
Plan
artifacts.
for, you're not consolidating.
Historical.
Preservation.
preservation.
Preservation, thank you. Of, historical materials I'm gonna put, because we got everything.
Plans for the organ.
Right.
Okay, so that would be
that'd
the
part of that.
contents.
Right.
Would that come under this, or would that be a separate one?
No,
That's
I
a
think,
physical, it's not historical.
We had preservation of historical materials.
I think that's really what you're worried about, right? I mean, the
Right.
organ's gonna stay with the building. Whatever.
Necessarily, it's.
You don't think so?
It's mobile. It's not like a pipe organ, that's much different.
Right.
And it's worth almost 250,000.
You're looking at it, there it is,
Digital speakers
Right.
and
digital.
computer.
It's all speakers and computers.
I heard it was amazing. I mean, it sounds great.
You've heard it, right? All right, so do we want to put that down here, something about our physical, stuff?
Disposition of physical assets, and that would include the organ and the piano.
But that would be in the event of a sale more.
And they need to deal with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe.
But if we merged, I mean, somebody might come here. you know, in case, in that case,
Right.
you know, we're jumping ahead of ourselves on some of this stuff. But
Pick what you could work on this week, or do you already have tasks assigned for this week? And then we'll call it a
Are
day.
we okay with 7 and not 10?
Yeah,
What
they
is
only
it
have
again?
6.
Oh,
Actually, they ended up with 7 too. That's good. That's in. There is still the city officials part, if we wanna try to, I mean, I think
Dialogue.
we're already doing that over on this group.
Right.
Is that good to leave it there, or do you think we should keep something in?
Well, I think it probably goes with everything. 'Cause I don't know what they're gonna talk about. You know, might have something to do with merging, it might have something to do with selling,
Yep.
you know.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Because when we had that luncheon for community leaders, we had one in 1999, and we had all the movers and the shakers coming, and they thought we were going to tell them that we were leaving. And we got a good turnout because that's what they thought we were gonna tell them.
Well, that's all right, I got a
So,
call this
you're
week
welcome.
and was told that our doors were closing.
I'm sorry, what was the beginning?
I got a call this week from someone and said that they heard that our doors were closing.
Well, I hope you set them straight.
I told them as of right now, we're fine.
We're looking at all options.
I'm just, not to change the subject, but who is going to want to come here?
Well, I have a thought, and I
Well,
mentioned it.
I know what your thought is.
Yeah. My thought is, and I was trying to do more research on it, but the First Haitian Baptist Church started in this building, renting from us upstairs. They're an American Baptist congregation, and we had a wonderful relationship with them. I mean, of all the Haitian groups we've had, that was the one. They left because they outgrew the space. They bought either a VFW or American Legion home on Central Avenue. They are outgrowing their building. And to me, for them to come here and then possibly eventually buying the building. I mean, I don't even know if they'd be interested in it, but to me, it answers all, it ticks off all the boxes, you know, American Baptist, we have a good relationship. It would be very, very different for us. No question, it would be very, very different.
Which might bring about an earlier service because of the parking again. Their numbers and then the numbers up the church, up
Yeah.
the street.
But again, and I didn't wanna dispute,
Right.
but when I hear there's no parking, it just sets my hair on fire. Because if you wanna park in front of the door and there's not a place, then suddenly there's no parking. You can park on Church Street, you can park on Broadway, you can park on Union Street, you can park in the garage. There's plenty of places, if you don't mind walking, 25 steps.
Is the garage free?
On the Sundays, yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
and that's mainly what we're talking
Right,
about,
right.
is
Alright,
during
so we're
church
gonna-
services.
All
We're
right.
gonna wrap up.
We are, huh?
Is that
Do we
okay?
have to?
Is that okay?
First,
The first Haitian Baptist Church.
That's what I'm supposed to hear.
Yeah,
That's why they're here.
All right.
Thank you.
yes, and if everybody can fill out their survey, I would love it.
I have
Where does this
No, I'm not
piece of
gonna
paper
fill
stay, Brian?
So,
Does that go with you?
let me grab a picture of it and it can go with you.
Okay,
As long as you promise to bring it back.
I love it. Otherwise I'd have to write it all down.
And Barbara, I'm not gonna fill out the,
To me.
do I go official or do I use my?
This is the group for merge,
Yes,
where's the cell group, whatever.
yes. And that was a mongrel group, I'm not sure. Brian, what's that third group?
I
I
was
said
bad.
it was a mongrel group. I
This is
said,
a group to talk about making sure, talk about who we are, what's really important to us, and to kind of doing a lot of mirror time.
Well, we are,
Focusing on
and what?
and
We
what's
are-
important to us as we have this conversation.
Yeah, because all these things are gonna melt together at some point, you know. Everybody on this,
Eliminate, because you don't know what all their philosophies are.
yeah. Did everybody on this team get a list of the people on the team? Because there's phone
Yes.
numbers, if we had to get in touch with one another?
Yes.
I'm just gonna stick this up so the other girl can see it.
Okay.
Yeah, see you later.
Okay.
If you need it. Betty, you got the list of people on the
Yep,
group? It
yep.
says Rosemary
Yep.
at the top.
Yep.
Joanne, you got one?
Oh, no,
Paul's
I
got
don't think,
one here.
wait a minute. I don't know what he's
Well,
got.
that's attendance.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, is it
No,
yours?
do you have one of
No,
those?
it's ours.
No, I
It says
don't.
Rosemary at the top.
No, I don't.
Yeah, it's just if we have to get in touch with one another, everything is on one piece of paper.
Oh, okay.
I guess Ann, I think Ann got one. Rosemary, I gave you the list of everybody on the team with phone numbers, right? I would like it because if I don't have all of them, then I can't
Okay.
try to tabulate them.
I didn't.
Are you taking pictures of
Because I don't know enough about.
No, and I don't either, you know, but I mean, this is just a guide, if somebody really knew something
No,
important.
I don't.
Yeah, so that's fine, you know,
I
that's,
mean, I might say no later on, but.
yeah, yeah.
How far would you be willing
Oops, wait a minute.
Well, you were in this group last week. You were in the sun group last week.
So, but I've changed.
So you wanna be, yeah, you're gonna be on the merged group?
I think so.
Okay.
How far would you be willing
Okay.
to travel? Would that be beyond this church or
From
beyond?
home,
the
from
area?
home, from home.
From home.
Make sure you get the markers in there too.
I paid 10 plus.
Isn't this better than doing nothing?
It's eight, the seven is 859, what?
So the other groups,
31st?
Oh,
The cell was an 859.
Who wants these?
Barbara does.
What? Thank you, oh my gosh.
So the other group's things are up there as well, if you wanna go look and see what the sellers think they're up to. Uncles don't have one.
What happens in Lower Bushnell stays.
Right, it's kind of.
Everybody wonders why I put the wall up.
This is kind of like the thinkers and the doers here.
I'm not making any judgment. I've been around long enough to know what not to do.
This is not my first rodeo.
It's like, you're gonna have, it's like, what if they're like all Yankees?
I don't know, Paul, you got all these papers here.
I tried. It's just been a very bad week.
Yeah, you're done with the money?
Oh, come on, there's only one piece of cheese, somebody has to eat
Well,
it.
pass it
Yes.
around.
Alright.
Leave it, the resident rat will come and get it.
Paul, move your arm.
Let me grab this if that's okay.
I gotta go home and take in Rebecca's dress.
Oh, good.
She made Allstate, and Julie ordered her a dress size 4. It was too big. She got a size 2. Is still too big up here.
Wow.
She was about this tall. So I got 7 inches, a long dress, 7 inches off the bottom.
I don't care.
Okay, hi everybody, at the end of the video.
Everybody give me
So
their
for the
survey.
merging 10 actions today, these are going to develop a plan for approaching churches. Determine list via survey, contacting.
Hi, Nancy.
Brochure of what, thank you. Brochure of what are something values. Only a mistake, not sure what that is. Supporting our staff. Building consensus.
Just the water has to run for it.
Identify people's needs, their wants. Plan for a presentation of preservation of historical materials. That makes sense. Under selling.
Any changes, Lorenzo, just come and let me know.
Okay, all right. Selling, realtor communication, appraisals, community communication. I think that means having a PR plan to tell the community what we're doing. This word is getting out. How long do we wait before we separate from the church building? Sale versus non-sale. Will selling offset our endowments? Personal property versus real estate, e.g. Oregon Steinway, what happens to stuff? Historical records, stay in Norwich, rent or buy a new location, sale to a new owner, we rent from them, it's a possibility. Okay, everybody, that's it for this week. Thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye.